Hello, everyone. Welcome to Filmkopath. Hope you are doing well and keeping safe. Today, to share our love of cinema, we have with us Mr. Rahul Desai. Rahul is one of our favorite film critics who has been writing about cinema spanning many years now, including that in Mumbai Mirror, Catch News, The Hindu, and The Film Companion. Rahul's essays on cinema and his film reviews have been an inspiration for us for a long time. On top of being a cinema enthusiast, Rahul is also a big sports fan. And when cinema and sports come together, probably there's no one better to talk about it apart from Rahul. But today we are not going to talk about sports films. Today we will discuss two landmark international films which are celebrating 20 years. The first one, In the Mood for Love, directed by veteran film director Wong Kar-wai, is considered to be one of the finest films of this millennium. It's a romantic drama that focuses on a man and a woman whose spouses have an affair and who slowly start to develop feelings for each other. The second movie for today is Malena, directed by Italian director Giuseppe Tornatore. It's an erotic comedy drama in the background of the World War II about a young war widow who was the obsession of every man and envy of every woman in a sleepy village in Sicily. So I hope you will enjoy this discussion. Thank you, first of all, Rahul. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this will be a riveting discussion. It's a real pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to discuss great films with fellow film lovers, and I hope to learn more about these films myself while talking to both of you.
Oh my God! Wow. I think chances of that happening are less. But anyways, let's be hopeful.
Yeah. Sure.
So we will start with In the Mood for Love. And my first question to you for In the Mood for Love is that, Rahul, tell us, how do you write such beautiful essays and talk about the films with least engagement in the plot and storyline again and again? So that is my first question to you. What is your process of writing those awesomely engaging essays which you do?
That's a very specific question, and no, I'm actually, come to think of it, like when I'm writing reviews or even when I'm writing my columns and all, my diving point into a particular essay or a piece is often not the film itself. Sometimes it's experiences from my own life. Sometimes it's random thoughts about filmmaking or about storytelling, about life. So, eventually the film itself, becomes incidental during these pieces sometimes. And I enjoy writing those kind of pieces more than the reviews, the more specific reviews itself. It's not like I consciously make an effort to not give out the plot or the premise. It actually doesn't matter to me so much, because I actually expect that the viewer knows what he or she already needs to know. And we are here to sort of really start a discourse about the film or have a conversation about the film. So for me, like the entire sort of technical way of writing a review where you need to maybe describe 2 or 3 lines and then get into your review has never really worked for me right from the beginning. So I guess I think my approach of treating every piece like an essay sort of helps in that. I never really realized it till those like you pointed out, actually, because sometimes I'm so tortured by the process of writing itself that I have no idea what I've written till I get responses to the piece. So yeah, I mean, and it's the same with all my favorite films. Even when I was writing about In the Mood for Love, in fact, I remember a lot of readers over the last few years were telling me, please write about the film, and I'm like, I'm not really. It's not like I can just suddenly make something out of nothing, or I'm not taking like audience requests here. It really depends on whether whether I want to or can, or I'm even feeling capable of writing about my favorite films. Because as you all may know, also, like, it's very difficult to talk about films you love and really rationalize that love and really express it. So I was just waiting for the right time, and whether it's In the Mood for Love, whether it's Arrival, whether it's a lot of other films, I just wait for a time when in a particular week I just think of if I'm ready to write about it, if my perception of filmmaking is mature enough to really deal with something like that, and then I start getting into the piece. And I guess the same thing happened with even this film, because I've been living with this film, as all of you have, for a very long time, and there's always the kid at the back of your mind that you want to write about these classics eventually, because you want these pieces to be remembered.
But the best thing that we love about your writings is it's not about that one film only. It becomes about a lot of other things, and that becomes a lot of, from a review, it becomes actually a part of an essay. It becomes a part, kind of a literature itself. So that has been such inspiration for us for a long, long time.
Thank you for using the term literature. I actually always aspire to do that, whether consciously or not. And I'm glad that the writing matters more than the film itself.
Yeah,
I think it absolutely does. When at least when you do it, it absolutely does. I would like to ask you that when you watched In the Mood for Love for the first time, what was your experience? And was it like when you watched it the very first time, you had something within you tell you that this is something special, this is something which is going to stay with me? Or did that come after repeated viewings? So what was it like?
My first experience with In the Mood for Love was, it really wasn't like love at first sight, so to say, because I think I watched it like around 10 or 12 years ago. A very dear friend recommended it. Wong Kar-wai was her favorite director. I had never actually heard of him before I was friends with her. So she sort of kept talking about this director who I've never heard of, and I'm like, what is a good diving point into his filmography? And she mentioned this film, and I think I watched it at a particular phase of my life where I think I was in a new relationship or something. So obviously, your experience of watching a film is always colored by the phase of life you're in at some point. So when I watched In the Mood for Love, my first appreciation for the film was purely physical. I'd never seen such colors popping in a film like that. I'd never, first of all, seen Asian directors do that kind of filmmaking, that kind of storytelling. The narrative really did not interest me as much as the craft itself, because I remember I'd just come out of a filmmaking course after college then, and I was very interested in how films look and how they are crafted. And I think it was purely technical at that point. I was a big fan of, like a lot of people, my jumping point was the music, the score, the cinematography, just the mood of the film. And I was just very much in awe. Like I was at such a raw part of my cinephile journey that the narrative really did not stand out to me back then, because first of all, I was like, it's not your conventional love story per to say. It's a tragedy, and I wasn't really expecting something like that, because the mood of the film was totally at odds with what the film is actually about. So all of that came to me a bit later, as I started watching more films, not Wong Kar-wai films, but films in general. I started to understand a little more about the language of In the Mood for Love, and about Wong Kar-wai films. I watched a lot of his other films too, and I know, I mean, it's sort of trendy to say that a filmmaker's most popular film is not his best film, but honestly, in my opinion, like I don't think he's made a better film than In the Mood for Love, and for me, it'll always remain his defining film for me. And there are more mature films, there are more profound films that he's made, and they resonate with me at different parts of my life. But I only recently watched In the Mood for Love again, and it totally spoke to me on a very different level, because I wanted to write about the film. So I went in with half an agenda in my head, but I was totally carried away by the experience of actually watching it.
Right. So since you mentioned about the craft part, I just wanted to talk about Christopher Doyle's camera work. And it's kind of, the film starts and till I think it's 10-12 minutes, it's all frames within frames, right? The use of frame within frame in the Mood for Love is just awesome. And then there are scenes where the frame rate is reduced, it's kind of a slow motion. So if you just want to talk about how the camera captures the mood and the themes of the film.
Yeah, as I said, it's just, you're not used to seeing something like that in as an Indian viewer. When you watch, like, technically it's not a Western film, but it's still by a global filmmaker,
Right.
Of course he's from Asia, and of course, but the fact is he's from Hong Kong and he makes films for the world. So you're not used to seeing this particular visual language in a film, and I think that's the first thing that seduced a lot of us when we watched this film. And it still does. Like the frame rates, so many filmmakers over the years have been really influenced by his kind of filmmaking. And of course we've been seeing it for generations in Bollywood, the way they use slow motion, the way they play with frame rates, and the way they play with music, and the idea of romance itself as a visual language. But when you see a filmmaker like this do it in a film that I would say does not really merit the kind of language, it's a different kind of seduction that's happening in your mind then, because I feel like then there's that dissonance that's there in your head where you are like, okay, their partners are actually having an affair, but they are the ones who are trying not to be like their partners at the same time. I felt like the film was, the cinematography in particular was really probing the two protagonists to get into some sort of relationship. And the fact that you see the craft at odds with the characters themselves, who for once are treated as actual people and not two people in sort of this wooing phase of a romantic relationship. I found that very fascinating, that interplay between the people you write and the people you film. And for me, I think that's what the cinematography really captures. The more you watch it over the years, the more it starts speaking to you on that level.
It kind of, the couple, the husband and the wife who are actually in the relation, they are shown as phantoms, right? That you do not see the faces. When the dialogues are happening, they are not shown, and it's only these two characters being shown. So it's very unique the way, because in a film dealing with, say, adultery, you are more focused on the people who are actually in the act of adultery. Here, it's the other two which the film focuses on.
Yeah, and that's probably my most favorite part, and that's something I learned very late, after watching the film a couple of times. And I'm like, as I was just discussing with like a film like Sardar Udham, which just recently released, when a film actually shows something you're not supposed to see, or when a film is about something that it shouldn't be about, that itself is a filmmaking language also. And like as you said, the husband and wife that are having an affair, we only hear maybe snippets of their phone conversation. We see like or maybe a hand or a leg here and there, but and I found that it wasn't a gimmicky thing to do at all, because it's really like the film really teasing the viewers, saying that I know you are usually in the space of the people in the more dramatic sort of in a more dramatic space, but what we are going to what I'm really interested in showing you are sort of the casualties of a relationship like that, and people and regular humans who really struggle with something like that. And of course, as I grew older and as I went through my fair share of like relationships, friendships, human equations in general, I started to really understand that at the same time the film is not really judging the couple that's having an affair, because if you show them enough, and if you really tune into the conversations that these two are having about their respective spouses, it's very easy to make someone a villain and make someone and sort of really win the sympathy of the audience to them. But the most beautiful part of the film is that we don't really connect with these two characters that we see out of sympathy or sadness. We see them as actual sort of lonely people who are stuck in a particular situation. And the fact that Wong Kar-wai sort of really shot, I mean, I find the background very fascinating, that they use history itself. That matters so much, right? Because we don't see much of it. We, like, as an Indian viewer, I knew nothing about like British Hong Kong, and I knew nothing about the history of that particular part of the world. And I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time reading about it. But if you just know enough to know that the economy was in a situation where, say, two married couples are forced to really share a flat in a city like that, then that adds so much to your perception of the film. Because
Correct.
today in 2021, and to think of two married couples really sharing an apartment is more unlikely than you might have thought about in the 1960s. And that really that context, without really drumming it home, I feel that really matters, because there's so much in the way the landlady sort of really interacts with them and the way the character is written. So that way of really framing something, making history the foreground but the background at the same time, I found really fascinating. And I feel like the visual palette really has a reason to exist because of that.
Right. That's really a fascinating part of great films. Like uh, say I'll give an example for ourselves. Like in Gangs of Wasseypur, there's all these characters and all, but that fascinating part of the advent of Indian cinema that we have in the film, it's kind of talking about history without talking about history, and that's so much there in the Mood for Love.
Yeah, it is. It is apparently a subdued part of it, but if you really watch it again and again, you might realize that the protagonists are actually not really the protagonists of the film.
Tell me, Rahul. I mean, I felt like this. There's this theme around being watched in the whole film. You kind of feel as an audience like you are watching them from a distance. You are a neighbor and you are watching them from your window, right? Did you feel like that kind of a spying effect?
Yeah, that sort of voyeuristic, I mean, even balancing the cinematography, which really concentrates on the moments between the two people, balancing that with this, as you said rightly, the very voyeuristic gaze of like the camera at the same time. It works, right, in a film like that, when your spouses are really having an affair, and when society is looking at you in a particular way, and the way you are interacting, the way both of them are interacting in them, everyone's starting to judge them very slowly. That's why he hires the hotel room after a while to work with her.
Yeah.
And to basically escape that particular aspect of the way it looks at you. So of course everything is very very thoughtfully, like, really integrated into the film. And that feeling, that unsettling feeling of someone always watching them, or the camera being at a particular angle, or being at a particular height, I feel like that could have so easily distracted from the actual visual language of the film, that we were talking about, the frame rates and the colors. But it never really feels like that. It feels like it's just it feels like the camera, most of the time, they don't want the camera to be around both of them. It's like a third character, like a fly on the wall, and they are not comfortable with it. And it shows in their behavior with each other. It shows in their decisions, that we will not be like our partners too. And eventually, when the craft sort of fades off, the psychological sort of state of the characters, it's a very rare sort of amalgamation, I feel, which only films like this can really achieve.
I think actually listening to you, Rahul, I'm getting lost for questions actually, because this is so engaging. But I just wanted to, you actually addressed, I want to ask a question about the historical setting and Hong Kong at that time, but you addressed it. So I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to ask you is about the role the music plays in this movie. What do you feel about that? How much does it elevate the overall feel of the movie?
I feel like of course, you made this theme, and it's become like a creature of its own over the years. So it's very difficult in 2021 to look at that independently and say that, okay, this is how it fits in the film, because it's really become such a go-to theme, or such a source of so many other themes over the years. I see it in so many movies being repeated in different scenarios. But what I do feel about the theme when you watch it in context of the film, and trust me, there's not a week I go through without listening to the theme independently on my laptop. When you see it in context of the film, you sort of really realize that that first of all, it's more or less like a cocktail of sort of romance and tragedy, because it's almost like the couple want a theme like that, want the instruments of a theme like that to be scoring their sort of coming of age romance that they deserve, because their spouses are very easily having it without any sense of and we don't see that. And so a different theme is playing for the spouses at the same time. So what they are getting is the leftover theme in a way. And that leftover theme, you feel like in your head it might sound like that most of the time, because the violins are playing and the string heavy sort of score that the instruments that are chosen, you always feel like they want something different, but they are getting something like this. And even when the way they move and even the way they pass each other in the hallways or on the steps or whatever it is, you always feel like they are moving to a different theme in their head. But and that sort of that being at odds with their sort of desires and with their personalities and with their sense of morality at the same point, because they are refusing to get into any kind of relationship. That I feel like the music plays such a key role in informing how you look at them. And it's very easy to get carried away saying, oh wow, the slow motion really works with the music. But if you really get to the bottom of why the theme sounds the way it does, then you might really realize it. And that's why I like I like central themes like that. I like these core themes of every romance or every tragedy or anything that has, when you can immediately identify a sound, that means that a film has so much more reason, or a series for that matter, has so much more reason to exist, because there is thought behind putting it there. And there is, I always try to look at it from the perspective of the people in the film. And for me, this particular way of looking at the theme has always worked.
Achha, Rahul, tell me, I mean, I know it's left up to interpretation, but that Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chan, they never take the relationship, beyond what we see. So what do you think? What is the reason? Is it the time they were living in? Or is it like they were waiting for each other to take the next step? Or it is like Wong Kar-wai itself is teasing with us, the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's always more romantic to show, the viewer a story of lost opportunities, of, untaken chances, of incomplete phrases most of the time, then actually show that, and they had those moments, they had those scenes when it's raining, they have those scenes right at the end, they really have that scene. But I don't think like the filmmakers really teasing you or really torturing you, but it feels like they really come from a space of knowing where they stand and knowing what they should do and what they shouldn't do. I can tell you that they obviously regret their decisions. There is no doubt about it. And that is very clearly shown in their their, sort of will they, won't they, almost sort of bumping into each other in the future before leaving. And that's the thing, what I find most fascinating about life most of the time is I feel like most of our experiences tend to be the detours we take in our life. It is not the actual direction we are meant to go in. So and that's what I find most fascinating, because these detours eventually really become a cumulative sort of sum of who you are, and they add up to make you the person you are. And who's to say that I shouldn't be somewhere else doing something else right now, or with someone else by now. And I feel like in a film like In the Mood for Love really sort of evokes that feeling of that very melancholic feeling of whether they are where they should be, or whether they are doing the right thing or the wrong thing, because it ceases to matter after the end. And that's what a film needs to really weave into its interpretations rather than actually show it. And it's up to people like us to really take what we want out of it and make it a sum total of our experiences. And that's one thing I've learned over the years. And I always find it fascinating when a film really tells you that maybe this isn't supposed to happen, but we are still showing you something, and because then it understands that life doesn't really pan out the way it's supposed to or according to our plans. And I feel like In the Mood for Love captures that particular whimsicality of life more than most films.
You know what? I was preparing for this discussion and I was watching it, I think, last week. And at one point of time, I was feeling like they're not getting close to each other because I am watching. It's like that spy or, the neighbor, whatever you say. And I was like, if I switch off the, my laptop, maybe they would get close to each other.
That's a great way of looking at it. Maybe like if I always wonder what happens when the film ends and when or we switch off the laptop. It's very different from the film ending, right? Then
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's a lovely way of like imagining that maybe. But then again, happily ever after can be anything. For all they found their soulmates after that, and I'd like to think that this relationship really bolstered their sense of morality in the future.
I have to ask you this actually, because there are so many theories around it. So what do you think about the ending, Rahul, the Cambodia sequence and the secret Mr. Chow hides there? What's your take on that?
I think, the best part about that sequence is I always struggle to associate it with this film. It always feels like I watched it in another film most of the time, like maybe I've just thought about it in my dreams or something. And that's, I guess, what the sequence is supposed to do too, in a way, because it's totally at odds with the rest of the palette of the film. And it shouldn't be there, like in the sense of not just tonally, even at a sentimental level. Of course, they talk about it earlier. And of course, you think of the characters reaching that place at some point and actually whispering something, and you want to know what they said. But the whole point is that it's really more for the viewer than the characters themselves. And I feel like we over the years, of course, have our own interpretations of why that scene exists and why it should be there. But I think the best part for me is I keep confusing that scene with another film I've seen, with a Korean film I've seen, or with something else I've seen, because I find that fascinating, because there's so much of their relationship too that that the filmmaker does not intend on showing. There are specific moments. I always feel like we are seeing in between moments of their relationship, or their whatever interpretation of the relationship they have. And and I always feel like the last scene sort of works in that context, because the filmmaker is then finally showing you what you're actually supposed to be seeing eventually, because that is the closest to a happily ever after the individuals will get, if not them as a collective. So I always find that scene very fascinating, and it leaves you with a sort of very haunting sense of what In the Mood for Love was about.
If you have to pick one scene, Rahul, what would be your best scene from the film?
I don't think I have a best scene as such, but I think like I just love the moments where they pass each other by in the hallways, and it's not so much the music and the frame rates and everything like that, but it's just simply the filmmaker recognizing that the electricity when you pass someone that you're supposed to be with, or that you're not supposed to be with at the same time. It's just a filmmaker recognizing a moment like that. And of course, that is the original recognition of the moment, because so many filmmakers after that have done that, for so many moments. And you normally see a song play, but this is just, it's just a slowing down of time itself that I find so fascinating. And I find it very nice that, a lot of filmmakers after that have really not aped it, but sort of adapted it in their own ways, because that really is the language of romance for a lot of us in our heads also. So that's basically the filmmaker just, telling you that this is what could have been, but, this is what it is. I think a lot of us watch it for the first time for all the wrong reasons, of course, because we are guys, and we have raging hormones, and we hear stories about the most beautiful woman or actress in the world being in a film that has a lot of explicit scenes. So of course, like most red-blooded males, we all sort of really tune into the film already coming from the direction of who we are, like as gender-wise and hormones-wise, and